The skies over Gaza are filled with rockets and missiles flying in both directions, incoming and outgoing fire. In the Israeli town of Ashkelon, north of the Gaza Strip, Hamas rockets continue to cause destruction. Israel has called up hundreds of thousands of reservists as it prepares the next stage of its retaliation. At least one government minister has joined the troops to avenge what he calls Israel's 9/11.
This is not going to be another circle. We're going to chase and hunt each and every militant of Hamas. We're going to chase and hunt their leaders. And we will fight until the end against them, and we'll be victorious, not just for us, but for the sake of the civilized world.
A ground offensive by Israeli forces looks likely. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told his country to prepare for a long and difficult war that he says will reshape the Middle East.
And joining us from Tel Aviv is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus from the Israeli Army. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for your time. Israel is massing forces on Gaza's border. There is, of course, speculation that a ground offensive into Gaza is imminent. Is that something being considered or planned as things stand now?
Yes, good night. Thank you for having me on your show. Israel is fighting for and defending itself on three fronts. The southern front in Gaza, which you have spoken about, is still active, and there are still attacks by terrorists trying to get into Israeli communities. They are met by Israeli soldiers who are ready to engage and have ended all of these engagements with killed terrorists in the latest hours, both in Ashkelon and in another community in the south. Rockets have been fired at Israel from Syria. We do not yet know if it was Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, or the Syrian armed forces, but we retaliated fire towards those who fired, and currently the situation there is stable. In the north, along our northern border, Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy terror organization, has fired anti-tank missiles, and other terrorists have tried to infiltrate across the border. All of those events have since been taken care of, and currently there is no fighting there, but we are deployed in significant strength and numbers, vigilant and ready to respond to any aggression from those areas.
So
in the south, we have
for spelling all that out. My question is a ground offensive into Gaza something that is being planned or considered?
Yes, I was just about to get to that. So in the south, we have deployed, or we have called up 300,000 reservists from infantry, armor, artillery, combat engineers, and combat intelligence units. They are now around the Gaza Strip, getting ready to execute their missions, preparing, getting their gear and everything in order. The assignment that the IDF has been given by the Israeli government is to take away all of Hamas military activities, so that at the end of this war, Hamas does not have any military capacity to kill, terrorize, or hurt Israeli civilians.
Can I take your answer to mean that you are not ruling out a ground offensive into Gaza?
You'd be correct in assessing that. All options are on the table, and as I said, our troops are preparing in order to implement the mission, to execute the mission that we have been given by the Israeli government. We are at war against a bloodthirsty terror organization that is as brutal, ruthless, and inhumane as ISIS was in its worst days. And I think that there is unfortunately ample evidence of that when you see the images coming out of the kibbutzim, the communities along the Gaza Strip, of 40, 50, and hundreds of Israeli bodies that are scattered across those communities, including women, children, and the elderly. The only conclusion that you can make once you see that footage is that we are dealing with monsters that have no regard for human life and crossed the border only in order to kill and take hostage Israeli civilians.
So you just mentioned these hostages, and I do want to ask you about that. How does this very, very complicated mission complicate these efforts in terms of getting to the hostages held by Hamas militants? Because on the one hand, there are strikes from the Israeli military onto Gaza, but on the other hand, you want to rescue the hostages that are being held in Gaza. Could you spell this out a bit more clearly for us, the complicated the mission that's ahead of you?
Yeah, I think you touched upon the complexity quite well. The situation is that there are dozens of Israelis in Gaza. Most of them are civilians. I'm talking about women, children, disabled people, elderly people, and even babies or toddlers. There's even a Holocaust survivor that we assess is being held by Hamas. We know of hostages that are also with dual nationality. There are Americans, Germans, French, Brits, Brazilians, and Ukrainians, and from additional countries that are being held by Hamas. So this situation, this extremely complex situation, is not an Israeli problem, only an Israeli problem, but we are talking about many countries that have their nationals at the mercy or lack of mercy of Hamas. You are right that the complexity here is immense, but our focus is the strategic focus of denying Hamas the ability to have any military capacity against Israel. And that is what our aerial campaign is focused on, and that is what the next stages of our military operation will be focused on.